And he's talking about down to zero and then getting a train.
My name is Julianne and I'm Festival Director of the Dublin Festival. For over 10 years we have worked with RT Arena and our open night. So we always do a nice broadcast. And it was always kicked off the festival. I remember every year Sean coming in, striding in his briefcase, his notes, and always a big smile and asking how we were doing. The second he walked in and the second he sat on that stage, I knew I was in safe hands. And it was just this feeling of joy that it was going to be a wonderful opening night. Every year I said to him, you are the most amazing interviewer, and I meant it, absolutely. He was. So we thought it was very fitting that we would do this event today to celebrate Sean and to thank him for all the support that he offered us over the years. And we'll pass over to your host, Paula Shields, and give a warm welcome to our panel.
Hello everyone. As Julianne was saying, we're here of course today to pay tribute to Sean Knox, the late great frontman of the RT Arts Show Arena. If ever a man matched his surname, Sean did indeed rock, and it was a joke he was known to make himself a lot. And of course, it's impossible to do an event like today's and not think of his love of a live audience. We did many outside broadcasts, and indeed, the Dublin Book Festival holds a special place in the arena calendar. But anyone who came to those events will remember the comedy of Sean, hamming it up, as he would say, as his own warm-up act before we go on air. Sean was the face, the voice, and the heart of the arena ever since it began in September 2009. 16 years of conversations with actors, artists, musicians, writers, the list goes on. So I'm delighted that we have four of our regular guests today. Poet Paula Meehan, the writers Kevin Barry and Cathy McMahon, and the musician and composer Colin McNamara. Finally, I want to welcome Sean's partner Cathy, who is in the audience. Would you give them all a round of applause? So Kevin, I wanted to begin in the beginning, in a sense. You were in the show this year talking about your play at the Abbey in the Cave, and I'm just wondering if you could give us a sense of what it was like to be in the studio with Sean as host.
Yeah, I suppose like the outlook of Sean's background as an actor, and I actually never saw Sean in his acting days. I'm far too young. And like I was on a lot with Sean over the years. I was trying to count maybe 20 times, you know, for books and plays and whatever I'd be up to. I think during the pandemic especially I was on all the time because we were trying to fill the airwaves. And I don't want to call myself a Interpol, you know, but I got so used to being on with Sean during the lockdowns that I wouldn't even stop cooking the dinner. I'd be like, on one hand on the phone, I'm doing the broadcast, and I'd be stirring the onions in the garden with the other. But you just forget, and that's a kind of great crack as well, you know. Always very light. Like he had lovely balance of going deep into the work and keeping it kind of very light on the surface.
I know Keshi, he was here, we were very pleased. We were delighted with anybody who come on in the pandemic, as you know, technology is forthcoming. Paula, you've been on to pay tribute to the people. We did a lovely piece about Paul Durkin at 80 this year, as well as talking about your own poetry. How do you find Sean as a host?
Oh, well, I loved connecting to him because he's so big and I'm so small, and he gave you this big bear hug and you felt immediately kind of empowered in a positive place, which wasn't always the case with interviewers on radio or television and poetry, because people have been traumatized by poetry as children. mean, you speak about his impeccable preparation, and Paula, at the risk of embarrassing you, I have to say the symbiotic relationship between your initial probing and research and what you fed to Sean in terms of context for the artist, it has always been fabulous. So he was really prepared. And the other thing about the interviews was you just forgot. You forgot that this was, you know, there were ears out there in the country all peaked up to find you. Because it just made you feel like people did their braggies. And I know that sometimes I said things I definitely shouldn't have. The example that my family still called me on was just after we were let out of the last great plague's lockdown. He said to me, "Oh God, I heard you got married recently." And I married Theo probably out of fear after 35 years. And I said, and I heard myself say, "Oh yeah, I was held hostage by a masked man." Stirring the onions and garlic dog. So yeah, he could make you forget that, you know, and get into the intensity. And he wasn't afraid. He was a fearless interviewer.
Kathleen, you were a short story judge for 2 years in a row, so you'd have done the bees with us as well as talking about fiction, your own writing and your grandmother's. What are your memories of being in studio with Sean?
Doing the bees with him, you mentioned how many outside podcasts he did, and I think when you went out with him in the theatre setting with an audience, the charisma of him, I mean, the actor's training, the beautiful voice, the physical presence, and it's really important. I mean, he was almost like a circus ringmaster, you know, he gave that sense of occasion to the whole thing, and just the sense of RTE is coming to town, this is an event, you know, which I think means a lot to people. You know, like to have that sense of occasion around it. The other thing I think he did, and we really saw it with Francis McManus, because a lot of the time you have first-time writers, you have people who maybe had never submitted a story to anything before, were gathered with their families. He had that quality when he was interviewing people of almost like a good date, making you feel like you were the only person. And I think writers are artists in general are such insecure creatures that makes you feel incredibly safe. You just want somebody to concentrate on you for that moment when they're talking about your work. And I saw him do that over and over again, even, you know, to 10 people lining up to talk about their stories. He just could give that attention, which was an amazing thing to do. It made people feel very good about themselves and about their work.
Colin, playing music live at your own gigs is one thing. I imagine talking about it live on air is something else.
Yeah, indeed. I suppose when you're heading into, you know, to do live writing especially, it's always, you know, a matter of kind of running the gauntlet. It's kind of, things can go wrong, do go wrong, but I suppose there was, in Sean, there was an element of just, as Kathleen said, just safety. You know, he was definitely, say, an Irish chorus, of course, a friend in the course, and it just felt like any anxiety you might have had or rush to get to the studio was all just kind of evaporated. And you were just like, you know, chatting to your friend or something. It was very easy. And I think that was, that could be mistaken for him being really relaxed, but actually, I think it goes back to how prepared and professional he was actually.
Yeah, there's a lot of paddling going on with him. But he loved, I think his love of artists and being in chair and listening to them.
Yeah, and he was so knowledgeable as well. I mean, his questions were like interesting questions, you know, so which you know, you learn a lot about what you think by a music interviewer, you know.
Paula, you could read a poem or two for us today. I wonder, would you give us My Father Received His Vision of St. Francis?
Would you like to walk to the...
Yeah, if you want.
So I know as a father, he always spoke fondly about his children. He asked me a few times about this poem off air, whatever the connection
was a poem called My Father Perceived as a Vision of St. Francis. Just the loving, his loving, he had a huge loving nature. He was compassionate and he was intensely kind. I mean, I remember with artists starting off, maybe their first time being interviewed, and sometimes they become tongue-tied and lose the thread, and he just fed them the information till they got their breath and got back into it. So my father perceived as a vision of St. Francis. It was the piebald horse in next door's garden frightened me out of a dream with her dawn whinny. I was back in the box room of the house, my brother's room now, full of ties and sweaters and secrets. Bottles chinked on the doorstep. The first bus pulled up to the stop. The rest of the house slept, except for my father. I heard him rake the ash from the grate, plug in the kettle, hum a snatch of a tune. Then he unlocked the back door and stepped out into the garden. Autumn was nearly done. The first frost whitened the slates of the estate. He was older than I had reckoned. His hair completely silver, and for the first time I saw the stoop of the shoulder, saw that his leg was stiff. What's he at so early, and still stars in the west? They came then, birds of every size, shape, colour. They came from the hedges and shrubs, from eaves and garden sheds, from the industrial estate, outlying fields. From Dovercross they came, and the ditches of the North Road. The garden was a pandemonium when my father threw up his hands and tossed the crumbs to the air. The sun cleared O'Reilly's chimney, and he was suddenly radiant, a perfect vision of St. Francis, made whole, made young again in a fingerless garden.
One of the things that we knew working with Sean was how intuitive and understanding he had of artistic processes for any art form. But what did you see of that in him when it came to writing?
Funny, when you asked me to do this, I could kind of canvass an opinion among other people who've been guests on Sean's show in the past, and so many people mentioned that. I mean, Louise Holden, who's a musician, said the wonderful thing about the interview by Sean was he was interested in the music, how you make it. And I think Colin referred to that as well. For writers, I mean, you do interviews, a lot of the time generally interesting interviews, ask the weirdest questions, and mainly about your life. Sometimes very disarming, strange questions, very personal questions. To go on Arena was such a joy because he didn't really ask you what's the book about, which is actually the hardest question you can ask. You don't have a clue. It's for other people to figure that out. Sean would always want to know how you do it. And he was interested in craft and how we put it together. And I think for all of us, that's what we're interested in too. So it was like, my husband's family were woodworkers, and they sit around talking about how a drawer slides in and out of a cabinet, you know? And you have the same sense with him that you're a community of people who want to figure out how this thing is done. It just made it very interesting to be in a conversation with him, I think.
Colin, music was very important to Sean. He was a musician himself. But what do you remember of your conversations with him off air and on in terms of that?
Well, I think one of the last conversations I had with him was actually not in a dissimilar context to this. It was at the Shared Ireland initiative. There was a launch of it, and it was, you know, the Grace and Good were there, and we were just having coffee and chatting about music, and he was talking about Bryce Dessner and his recent release, or string quartet, I think. So he was, obviously he'd been listening as part of his homework. I didn't realise that until a few nights later when he was interviewing Bryce on the radio. But it just is very wide knowledge, and you know, it just the breadth of his knowledge that he carried so lightly, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
says there's nothing he won't do. For you, that conversation about the back room, that behind the scenes of the art firms that you work in.
Yeah, I must say I thought a special light came into Sean's eyes when he was talking about plays and theatre, you know. And I got a sense talking to him off the air that in terms of his own acting career, he was kind of really glad to be out of it, and also that he still had acting for that time, you know. And I think what all good stage actors have is, and I have great sympathy and empathy with them for it, is it's truly vocational. You know, to do it because they have to do it, and he did. And actually, just in April this year, I was doing an event in the Hawkswell, up in Sligo, where I live, in the lobby beforehand. They had all the stills of plays up on the wall outside. There was one of Sean in some play with Pat Kinton in the very early 1990s, and he was looking every bit the leading man, you know. Said I have to take a picture of that now. I'm slacking about it the next time I'm in. And I was in the follow-up with Aaron Mann for the play The Cave. I forgot to slack about the shot of so I was pulling about that after. But I must say, an abiding thing, memory I have on the show with Sean, as well as that, you know, every year we'd be interviewing their papers, and it would be me and 3 or 4 contributors, and invariably what we wanted to do as contributors, first time on the radio, and first time on live radio. It's terrifying, you know, to do it for the first time. And very subtly, we always make a special effort with those people who are making their debuts to relax them, you know. And invariably, every year after the show, 1 or 2 of them will say to me, God, your man is actually really good at this, isn't he? And it's kind of in the way that listening to the phone in the kitchen, you might notice, but when you see it in the studio, you know, there's when somebody is really, really adept and gifted at their job, there's a sense of effortlessness. I think Sean very clearly had that.
Well, with poetry, I think Sean's love of music came to his understanding of it. And I absolutely know, working on any new book of poems by any poet, he would read at least as much as I had, and absolutely bring his own thing. But for you, how did you find his understanding of your, you know, what you do?
Oh, absolutely sublime. Music, but also his deep knowledge of myth, of history, and of the social circumstances out of which the poet is writing. I mean, his grasp of context was really, really sharp. And I always felt that you were being given great respect as a poet, and also that he had a wide reading in other poets. And it came out of those tribute programs that he did. Like 10 years after Shane Sweeney died, and his family produced that 100 poems, their own choice of poems. We did a panel that I was on with, you know, Chris Morash, the professor, Shane Sweeney, professor in Trinity, and other contributors. And he was great at a group kind of interview, because in some cases, like, you know, one person might get lost, especially if you're on with these phenomenal yappers that you get in Irish literature. So he would always make sure to bring in the voices, and he was so skilled that way. And then there was the great, I really loved, that was on with Colin, speaking of great yappers, Colin Tobin and Dermot Woodger, as I call him for fingers. And I was on with them about the book 80, I believe, edited by Mal McMonigal for Paul Durkin's 80th birthday. And we were doing a big gig in the Gate for him to celebrate that. And he had the poems, he had the background, and again, like with the 2 great yappers, he managed to sandwich me in and get a word in edgeways. So he was really good at that, holding that group energy as well as the individual one-on-one.
Colin, speaking of live, will you play some music for us?
Sure. So this is the first tune that came to mind for some reason. I'm not sure, it's a kind of explain it, why, so it'll make more sense. But it's a piece that was part of my setting, a certain Theo Jordan, a masked man's poem, Sappho's Daughter, to music many years ago. So this is called Sappho's Daughter.
One of the things that any of us who work with him, anybody who ever listened to him, will always think about is the fun of the man, but also how good he was at obit surfing the arena has to do when an artist dies. So just a month before his own passing, Ryan Wilson died, and we only found out as we were going on air. I think Kay was producing that night. It was a great steadiness to him, Paula. And one of the other memories I have is when Sinead O'Connor died a couple of years ago. Sean had to break that news to the nation. And for us, we felt it was a great steadiness to him in those moments, wasn't there?
Yeah. And right off the cuff to put it together, to get the research and put it together in this fantastic, dignified way of talking about the recently deceased. And I mean, people were shocked by some of these deaths. Shane McGarrett, you mentioned Sinead, and as some of our great writers. And I have to say, when Sean himself died, like the shock, you know, like people were just, the ground literally shifted under people's feet. And I know that night, Arena, the staff just pulled this thing together, fantastic tribute to the man himself. I mean, that was absolutely exactly what was needed. Because how do we collectively, for these figures that we might only know on the radio, we might only know from their public art, how do we express how important they are in our lives, in the individual life? And these tribute programs often right in the emotional moment. And he was just fantastic at it. You know, calming, dignified, but yet allowing the emotion to flow.
Kevin, he was a really gifted listener. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, and I think what you never had with Sean, no matter what the subject was, there was never the sense that he was following a list of questions. You know, that he was always kind of, it became a conversation very quickly. And he was very engaged in it. I was happy for him to take kind of odd stance and go in strange places. And often when he'd be on to me during that it was like, they would go to very strange places. And we would talk about caves and all sorts of things. I remember
Columbo drowned sometimes.
Yeah. I remember I was talking to him about my novel Beetle, which was in 2015, about John Lennon practicing primal screaming on an island off County Mayo, and he was asking me about the research I did. I said I was out there, I did it myself, primal screaming, and we got right into it. Then he was going, how did it go for you? And I was like, Jesus, I'm right as rain, my sense actually. I started to confront my inner demons out of today. I can't remember the details, but we kind of forgot about the book and talked about primal screaming for the whole slot that we were on. But like, you have to mention a little bit about Sean's voice as well, you know, as a musical instrument in its own right, and it really kind of furnished the room, you know, and brought into everyone's kitchen at 7 o'clock in the evening when you're, thank God, the men's show is over, you know. It's we're going into a different place.
I think everything Sean was in his voice. Do you agree?
Indeed. I mean, it was funny. I was listening recently to one of those John Dublin early morning programs, and just it's so interesting. Just over a few short decades, how the acceptable radio voice has shifted, and how just it's opened up from having this kind of clipped sort of BBC-esque broadcasting, and so just Sean was the epitome of a regional, beautiful Monaghan accent, and it just had such a lovely timbre and sonorous voice. It was, I mean, you know, you could get distracted, you know, by the beauty of his voice, you know. What were you saying again, Sean? Sorry, your voice, you know. So yeah, a musical fellow.
Kathleen, you were on with your cousin, fellow writer Alice Ryan.
We're going to out me here as the yappiest writer.
A couple of no, you're going to out yourself, my dear. You came on to talk about Mary Lamb, who's your grandmother, and you were such a funny double act. I remember afterwards, Sean and I were going, they could go on the road with this. But remind us of that.
Paid us the very dubious honour of telling us we were the most people guests he'd ever had on the show, which we pondered over afterwards and thought, we better rein ourselves in a little bit. Yeah, that was great. But I think we were there that day to talk about Mary Lamb. I mean, I think one of the things about it, so many people have mentioned, is the lack of snobbery, whether he was talking about a great legacy writer like Mary Lamb, or whether he was talking about somebody just entered the Francis McManus, whether he was talking about patchwork or, spoken word. And I think that's so important because when you look at RTE and Shetland, a lot of arts which recognises the importance of the arts, not just as something that's monetised and that's measured in success in movie theatres or something. And I just really, really hope that that is maintained in the schedule as just a reflection of how important it is in Ireland that people are creating this work all over the country. And just the lack of snobbery.
Sean probably liked the story of it as much as the poem itself, because again it's another poem concerning my father, who would have described me when I was a young woman, starting out in the path of poetry. He would have told people, oh yeah, she's taken to the poetry the way people take to drink. Something that should be, probably practiced in a secure environment where they teach basket weaving as well. So he loved the story that my father was a lifelong gambler and also a crossword fanatic. And towards the end of his life, we became great pals and a lot of stuff was resolved. But in the last year of his life, I was a bet in Paddy Powers that I'd come up on the leaving cert, and I was a clue in a crossword. So he looked at me with this kind of awe. So I know Sean loves that story. But here's the poem. Diamond faceted his breath. My father's death lay on me like a feather. His own hard fought for last mortal breath was diamond in the radiant salmon weather. Light as the pages that fell from the mirror, toxic dump, bank billions lost, test tube birth. My father's breath could scarce disturb a feather. The going was hard at Dundalk at Uttoxeter, red era a horse he believed had some worth, given the right ground, the right kind of weather. The half-done crossword, 10 across, 8 letters, daughter. 9 down, bold, no, wild, 7 down, hearth. The words themselves as light as any feather I could carry every step of my future on the smooth or rocky contour of my path. Whatever the news, whatever the breaking weather. In the hospice garden, a child's laughter, falling like dry leaves to the hard black earth, was my father's death. The weight of a feather as I moved out into the coming winter weather.
Colin, you were on Arena a couple of times, as was the writer Colin McCann himself, to talk about his Narrative 4 project, about bringing young people together from very different backgrounds. Can you tell us a bit about that? And then will you play The Road to Jericho? Because I know you've been playing that recently.
I remember it was quite frost, not dissimilar to this morning, but I was caught in traffic. There was an accident, a poor man had been hit on a bicycle in Cornell's Court, and it was just the motorway stopped, and I was, watching the clock, and I'd given myself kind of 2 hours, perfect leeway time, and so I just turned off the motorway then and tried to navigate through Kilmainham, and anyway, onto the ringing the studio and managed to instead of being the first thought, they moving to the end. So arrived very breathless and then trying to negotiate the recession quartet here into the studio elegantly enough, and then just the red light goes on and play, and it was very stressful, but of course, he was just the perfect midwife for that situation where you landed and you just and relax, and so we then had a conversation about Colin about Narrative 4. This is the piece I played, and it's Colin, many of you may know that wrote a novel called Paragon, two real men, Rami Elhanan and Bassam Arami. And Bassam is a Palestinian from Jericho, and Rami is an Israeli Jew from Jerusalem. And they together founded a group called the Parent Circle, which is made up of bereaved parents from both communities, both sides of the wall, as it were. And they use, as they put it, their grief to end the occupation. Unfortunately, the price of admission to the Parent Circle is that you have to have lost a member of your family. So recently they were in Ireland with Colin, and I was over there in the West Bank in 2019, and I had a very life-changing, beautiful, intense week with these men. And so this is a piece of music from an ongoing project which will see the light of day this year, hopefully.
and his instincts as an actor fed into him as a broadcaster.
Yeah, I remember it must be exactly this weekend last year at the Dublin Book Festival. We were doing an arena broadcast for the 10th birthday of the journal I call it, Winter Papers. A big room down at Dublin Winter Lane, with a big crowd like this. And I was chatting with Sean at the side of the stage, and he was just preparing. We weren't going live yet, but he was just preparing to do his warm-up the crowd. And the sheer dream, kind of up to that, right now, whip a bit of life into this crowd, and just enjoying that. And of course he had the egg out of his hand inside 30 seconds, and just absolutely in his element, actually, just freestyling it, could warm up the crowd beforehand, and you really got the sense of the actor then as well. But it was like just that thing as well where the conversation would go in an unexpected way, because when you have a book out or a play out, you're yapping about it a lot, and you're going around the place, and you can get kind of, you can fall into kind of these quite prepared answers almost, that you're very adept at trotting out as if it's just occurred to you that second. But that was what was great going on with Sean, because it was never like that. It was always going to go to an odd little place or going on a little tangent away, and that's really refreshing. For you when you're going around talking about your book or whatever it is,
Poetry, it's as much a performance as it is read, How much did you feel you were in the presence of a fellow performer when you were with Sean on air?
Yeah, and I know that he was grateful for poets who put it out there, and he made great space for, the spoken word poets, the ones that rely so much on the performative moment. And with the more, it's hard to call us maybe old poets, maybe literary poets, he really appreciated you putting the energy in, because obviously, just if you don't have the voice to express the emotion, then it can be quite a flat conversation. So he really appreciated it, and it was completely part of his personality. And I think it allowed him to be multiple selves, depending on who he was actually interviewing. The musician part of him would come to the fore, the inner poet would come to the fore, the storyteller would come to the fore, depending on who he was talking to. But also there was the sense too that the adventure, he would go anywhere with you, he wouldn't be phased. I just loved just going there, saying the poems, he'd pick up on sometimes strange angles on it. So the actor was absolutely part of his performance, or one of his cells performance. I love that. And he tuned in, and I noticed this with many of his interviews with poets, he tuned in a lot to family stuff. He tuned in to poems about children, about parents, grandparents, and I think really had a soft spot for those poems, because he understood how an artist has to integrate those primary relationships. He got that, and the actor was right at the heart of that presence on the radio. You turned it on, and this, I think we've all touched on the voice. Wow, the soothing and the excitement. Fantastic.
Thank you. Colin's going to play us out in a moment, but I just want to say a few thank yous. Before we go, first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody in the audience for coming along today. Much appreciated. I want to say thank you to Imran for hosting us in this august room. Radio Centre is going to look very different tomorrow morning. I want to say thank you to Julianne, Willie, Simon, and everybody at the Dublin Book Festival. Thank you to my guests, Colin McNamara, Paula Meehan, Kevin Barry, and Kathleen McMahon. And I want to say thank you to Sean Box, wherever you are, for all that you still are to us today.
Called The Finish Line, the finish as in Helsinki. So, as for Sean on his continuing journey after his recent promotion. And Sean is just always full of joy, and this song is an attempt at joy.